Hello, scholars. Welcome to Lesson 6 of our study of Westward Expansion. Today, we will learn about further plans by the United States to own and settle the land west of the Appalachian Mountains. And we will learn about more trickery and fighting to get that land from the indigenous native people tribes already living there. So let's start with just a quick review of the map and the United States at this time. So remember, when they won their independence from Great Britain in 1783, right, this part in red, right, marked in red, the pink section, was the United States. When the United States purchased the Louisiana Territory, here marked in blue outline, the purple land, remember buying it for $15 million, mostly because they originally were trying to get right down here, the port city of New Orleans. It doubled the size of the United States. During that same time, right, people are moving over and to this area, Kentucky and Tennessee, and enough people are now living there that in 1792, Kentucky becomes a state. And then in 1796, Tennessee becomes a state. This quest to move, you'll remember a couple lessons ago, people were then spilling over into this area that you're about to see in yellow. That area, the Ohio Territory. Well, this whole area up here was the Northwest Territory. But they're settling here, right? And it's going to, as we learned, become the state of Ohio. Much fighting between the indigenous tribes, many battles, attacks from the United States government to the indigenous tribes living here. And then as that area filled up with colonists, settlers, farmers moving the native people off that land, more and more Americans were moving into this space right next door to the west, right, the Indiana Territory. That meant moving indigenous people off of that land, which you'll recall William Henry Harrison did through trickery with treaties that he tricked indigenous leaders into signing away the land for very little money. So today we're continuing on with this quest, right, to move further west, fill in these areas, right? More Americans are wanting to move to that area. The resistance to this continues. So even after so many Native Americans lost their land in the Ohio and Indiana areas and had to move west of the Mississippi River, there were still nearly 100 tribes living on land that the white settlers wanted. So, white settlers want that land, indigenous people are living there. So, in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, a law that said the indigenous people must move to an Indian territory that had been set aside for them in what is today the state of Oklahoma. Take a look. This area circled in red. So, this Indian Removal Act, right, gets some resistance, right? People working against that. So, the areas that we're talking about connected to 5 tribes of indigenous people: the Choctaws, Creek, Cherokee, Chickasaw, and the Seminole people. They decided the best way to keep their land was to adopt the ways of life of white Americans. Right? If they lived in a way similar to the settlers, to the farmers, to the people wanting to move onto that land, that this would be a way for them to get to keep their land, get to stay living where they're living. In the end, however, trying to do that, trying to assimilate and be like the white Americans trying to take over the land, didn't end up helping. They were still forced off the land, forced through that Indian Removal Act to leave the land and move to that area that is today Oklahoma. Most of the Cherokee tribe had to walk the entire way to Indian Territory, which took several months. Take a look at this map. So, as I mentioned, these five tribes of indigenous people, so this area, right, the southern part of the United States, right, where Virginia, Georgia, North and South Carolina, Florida are, right, this area, they're being forced off the land. The Cherokee tribe, especially, right, was hit first with this press to get off the land. They are walking to this area, right, that is today Oklahoma. During the walk, they suffered from disease, bitter cold, and hunger. Here's a painting called The Trail of Tears, right, painted after this long walk, right, where they were forced to take, right, just their very minimum belongings and were forced to walk on this trail, moving from their homes to this other land, being forced to do that. While 15,000 of them started out, only about 11,000 of them arrived alive. So that's a total of about 4,000 indigenous people who died from the cold, from diseases, from hunger during this long walk from their home to this land they were being forced to live on in today Oklahoma. The natives called this journey, right, this word right here, which means the Trail of Tears. Can you imagine why it was called the Trail of Tears? Right? Did what you say maybe connect to, right, tears over being cold, being hungry, right, being sick, seeing loved ones die from those things? Even the tears of simply having to leave your home, being forced to leave your home and being treated so poorly as you're being forced off your land and having to walk, like herding animals onto this other land. Quite a sad time. So the resistance continues. Further south, the Seminole Indians had similar problems when the United States gained Florida from Spain in 1821. A famous Seminole chief who fought against his tribe's removal was Osceola. Osceola was later captured by the United States Army. He failed in his quest to resist the move. Now, back to this idea that the United States, right, thinks it needs to expand to the west. So, manifest destiny. The United States felt it was important for the country to keep expanding. Perhaps you're remembering some of those reasons why that Thomas Jefferson had mentioned. So, remember, owning all of that land helps protect the country from being attacked by other countries. It gives the country room to grow as the population is growing. And At the time, 9 out of 10 Americans were farmers and they needed land for their crops. So, again, expanding to the West seems like a great idea. More land, as I said, was needed as the population kept growing, right? Future generations means that population is going to keep growing. So, what exactly is manifest destiny? We'll get to that in a moment. So, Americans believed they had created a special nation, and that meant they were destined for something great. Remember, they had chosen their own government. It was a place where citizens' rights were respected. So, had they created a special nation? Absolutely. But does creating your own government and being a place where your citizens' rights are respected mean that you can force others who are different from you off of the land on which they've been living? Hmm. They also thought that this was a country that extended the area of freedom to all the people of the country. This meant they were destined for something great because of these things, creating their own government, a place where citizens had rights, and where people were free. They were destined to do something great. Can you hear the connection there between the word destined for something great and manifest destiny? So they thought those things meant it was only right and natural for the nation to expand, that it was America's manifest destiny, meaning an obvious certainty for the future, that it was meant to be that they expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean, right? From Atlantic Ocean to Pacific Ocean, that it was an obvious certainty that they should own all of this. Right? Certainly, they are destined, meant to own all that land. Many people even believe that God intended that the United States should extend from coast to coast, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. This painting is called American Progress by John Gast. The painting, right, this American Progress, is showing this idea of expanding to the West, of manifest destiny, right? That it was meant for people to be moving to the West, right? Natives moving off the land, right? All this progress, the creation of trains and the railroad, right? Farmers moving west, right? Maybe hunters and trappers moving west, right? So this whole idea, right, in this painting, right, this angel signifying, right, the heavens, God, right, blessing them, saying, right, I guide you, I support you, I want you to make this move. Right? The steamboat back here, right? All of these things showing the progress America is making in transportation and in their livelihood, expanding to the West. Well, as you can probably imagine, there are some problems with the United States thinking that God wants that country to have all the land. This blessing, right, this idea of God wanting the country to have all that land, does not include African American people, right? Those people who had been enslaved, and Native Americans, the indigenous people who are being forced off their land. They are not a part of the blessing, part of the freedom that America is so proud of at the time. So it wasn't really as equal and great for everyone as they were trying to make it appear. And this idea, right, of manifest destiny and God wanting them to own all the land angered the borders of the United States. Mexico and Great Britain, which both had some land claims in what is today the United States, had some issues with this idea that God wanted the United States to have the land instead of Mexico or Great Britain. Couldn't they say that God wanted them to own the land that they were claiming? Maybe God wanted the Southwest to be controlled and owned by Mexico. So there were some problems with this manifest destiny idea. And we'll talk more about that quest in the next lessons. So, scholars, today we learned about further plans by the United States to own and settle the land west of the Appalachian Mountains. Right? That idea of manifest destiny, that they were meant, right? The United States was meant to own all the land from ocean to ocean. Remember, looking at that map, they're probably now about 2/3 of the way on this destiny that they think they have. And we heard about more trickery and fighting to get that land from the indigenous people, right? Congress tricking them, not so much tricking them, but passing a law in a government that really wasn't being recognized by the indigenous people and their tribes, passing a law forcing them to move off the land to a specific place on the other side of the Mississippi River, and then fighting to get people off the land. Osceola, remember, tried to lead a move against that and failed. So the fighting and trickery continued, and more indigenous people lost the land on which they had been living for hundreds of years. All right, scholars, your assignment now is to open the attached Google form, answer those 5 questions about today's lesson. You can look back at the lesson, listen to any of this information in the video again. Remember, when you're finished, click that submit button at the bottom of the Google form. Send those answers to your teacher. Good luck. Thanks for joining me again today, and we will continue with another lesson soon.